Well, I'm joined now by the managing director of the Lebanese advocacy group Kullu Irada and a former senior economic advisor to the United Nations, Diana Menhem. Thank you very much indeed for joining us now from Beirut. Just looking broadly at the situation, the situation on the ground in Lebanon at the moment. We're in a situation where more than 2,000 people have been killed. 1.2 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Just bring us up to speed on what's been happening during the last 24 hours on the ground.
I mean, what has happened in the past 24 hours is the same as what has been happening for the past few days. All eyes now are on South Lebanon. There's a huge fear among the Lebanese that what Israel had claimed to be a very limited ground operation in south of Lebanon is slowly turning into an invasion, into a huge ground operation. There is a real fear that this will continue for a very long time, unlike what was previously stated. And as these ground incursions continue, I mean, the Lebanese are living in total dystopia. I mean, it's a very dark reality of sleeping to the sound of bombs, hoping nothing will happen to the people you know and love, waiting for the daily death toll and wishing that it is low, and waiting desperately for the hostilities to end, which unfortunately, until the moment, the opposite seems to be true. The war is expanding, the death toll is increasing, and Lebanon, especially the towns in the south and in Dahye, are slowly being reduced to rubble. Today, nearly 1 out of 5 Lebanese are internally displaced, many of them coming from areas that have been completely destroyed. The Lebanese are living in awful conditions. The displaced are living in horrible conditions. Some of them are sleeping on the streets, others at the beach. Those lucky enough to be staying in an apartment are sharing it sometimes with 20 to 25 family members. Some are even taking turns to sleep. I mean, this is deplorable and unsustainable.
And in terms of the overall humanitarian situation across the country, I mean, even before this latest disaster in Lebanon, the government was under enormous pressure, households were under enormous pressure, the middle class has been plunged in many cases into poverty. Are people managing to make ends meet? I mean, presumably if people were living paycheck to paycheck and now there aren't any paychecks, I mean, are people going to be able to afford to feed themselves and feed their families?
I mean, what you're referring to is absolutely true. In fact, Lebanon has been dependent for the past 5 years on aid and on remittances that come from the Lebanese diaspora that send money to their families. And this norm is continuing today. And what is absolutely correct is that Lebanon has been struggling with an economic crisis, with one of the worst economic crises of the past 150 years, actually, for the past 5 years now. And that the state, even before the war, was unable to provide basic services to its citizens. So the country has been suffering for quite a while now, and now this war has compounded all of the miseries of the Lebanese. The state is extremely fragile. Its response is far from being sufficient compared to the needs on the ground, and many of the Lebanese are relying on personal initiatives and on non-governmental organizations in order for them to meet their needs.
And I'm just wondering, in terms of morale and listening to the situation you've described for us there, I mean, do the Lebanese people feel like the world and their allies have turned their back on them? And do people feel abandoned by the international community there?
The Lebanese are absolutely left on their own. It's not only the international community that has left them, it's also their own state that has left them. I mean, for the past 5 years, and of course now more than ever, the Lebanese have really forgotten what it means to live normal lives, to have careers, to think about starting a business in the country. They have definitely, unfortunately, given up on the option of making a future for themselves and for their children here. They are left totally on their own to their fate. The Lebanese state is incapable of defending their national interests. The international community has, for the past year made promises that it has been unable to hold with regards to actually stopping Israeli aggression, be it in Gaza or in Lebanon. And we found ourselves today in a situation where we're actually stuck between a never-ending cycle of Israeli aggression and, of course, Iran's regional interest, and Iran trying to push its regional interest at the expense of the Lebanese.
Indeed. And do you think, just referring to some of the points you've made there, that if Lebanon had a proper functioning government, that none of this would have happened, that things would have taken a very different turn?
I'll take the year 2006 as an example. I don't think that none of this would have happened, but I definitely think that had Lebanon had a capable government today that is able to draw a clear line between Hezbollah's calculations and between the national interest of Lebanon and of the Lebanese, then yes, the situation would have probably been different. We have lived this in 2006, where a government was able very clearly to push for Lebanon's interest, to get Hezbollah on the table and to get Hezbollah and the Israelis to agree to an agreement that actually upheld Lebanon's national interest. This is very far from today's reality. I mean, and you can see very clearly that the government is helpless. We can see in an outrageous statement, I mean, that completely undermined Lebanese sovereignty. The Iranian prime minister has indicated very clearly a few days ago that it was Lebanon's duty to defend Gaza, signaling his clear refusal to de-link both fronts and implying that the war in Lebanon had to go on. We can also see that the Israeli prime minister ominously informed the Lebanese in a statement that more destruction and death are coming to Lebanon. And in the midst of it all, the Lebanese state is absent, is extremely absent. There was a very shy attempt a few days before the visit of the Iranian foreign minister, to push for, to call for a ceasefire, to push for the implementation of 1701, but this was clearly deflected after the visit of the Iranian foreign minister.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to ask you about the message that was put out, I think, on Tuesday by Prime Minister Netanyahu to the Lebanese people. How did that go down?
Listen, regardless of what the Lebanese feel towards Hezbollah today, make no mistake, all the Lebanese realize that Israel is an enemy. And what we watched on the screen with Netanyahu's statement is actually Israel sowing more hatred and more extremism, the very same extremism that it claims to want to eradicate. These statements have really awakened deep fears among the Lebanese of further Israeli aggression, of a full Israeli invasion. The Lebanese have not forgotten what happened in 2006 and what happened before the year 2000. So no, the statement was outrageous, we believe. I don't really understand what was the purpose behind Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement. That was definitely outrageous, and the Lebanese felt outraged by it.
Has public opinion and public sentiment towards Hezbollah changed at all, would you say, in the last couple of weeks? And I'm just wondering, whether there are pockets of Lebanese society where people are secretly pleased that Hassan Nasrallah is no longer alive, and they want to see Hezbollah further degraded and weakened. I mean, are you hearing or seeing any evidence to suggest that public opinion is shifting?
I mean, public opinion is obviously shifting. The Lebanese, those of them who had not realized it before, many of the Lebanese today realize that Hezbollah has actually been dragging us towards mass suicide. This is a war that Hezbollah dragged the Lebanese into without their will. And at the same time, this is a war that Hezbollah has given to the Israelis. It's a war that the Israelis have wanted for a long while. So Hezbollah has given the Israelis the pretext for this war. And the Lebanese realize this very well. The Lebanese today are, if I want to sum it up in one word, tired. They are tired of ideological projects. They are tired of regional agendas. They are tired of being sold empty victories that are not reflected anywhere in their daily lives. Today, what the Lebanese want is to restore their sense of normal life. They want to restore their livelihoods. They want to be able to live in a normal country again. They are tired of these empty victories. The only victory for the Lebanese today is to find shelter and to restore their lives. And they realize that this is their priority today.
You've been talking about some events in the past, going back to 2006. I just wonder whether, just looking back, you can identify some key mistakes that were made in the past by people in government in Lebanon who managed somehow or other to allow Hezbollah to hold the entire country to ransom. What would you say the moments were when things could have been done differently and Lebanon wouldn't be in the situation it's in today, which is shackled by Hezbollah?
I believe that, first of all, if you want to talk about the past year, I believe that for a big part of the past year, Lebanon had the opportunity of a diplomatic settlement. It was very clear, the international community had repeated it so many times, even the Israelis had mentioned it so many times, that we had the opportunity for a diplomatic settlement. The problem is that the Lebanese government never had the courage to take this stand. It was rather repeating Hezbollah's statements. It was rather echoing Hezbollah's interests rather than taking a firm stand and standing for the interests of the Lebanese. This is one. Now, of course, if you want to go back to before this year, I believe that all of the political actors in this country have failed to build a state that can defend the Lebanese and a state that can actually treat all Lebanese as an equal footing. And this is not only Hezbollah's mistake, it's actually a crime that was committed by the entire Lebanese political class that has preferred to preserve its own narrow interest at the expense of actually building a state.
And for people watching who are wondering, Hassan Nasrallah is dead. His successor, we think, is probably dead as well. A large number of operatives and senior ranking officials within that group are dead or severely injured from the pager attacks of 3 weeks ago. How is Hezbollah still functioning? What do people say about that there in Lebanon?
I mean, it's very clear that, first of all, there's some sort of collegial decision-making that is at the level of whatever remains of the leadership, or the tier 2 or tier 3 of the leadership. But more importantly, on the ground, it's very clear that Hezbollah has moved to what it does best, which is sort of a decentralized structure with guerrilla-like warfare. And it's very clear that this has been effective, actually. I mean, to some extent, in south of Lebanon. Hezbollah continues to operate in south of Lebanon and to stand against Israeli aggression. So what we're talking about is more collegial decision-making at the level of leadership and the more decentralized structure, particularly with regards to guerrilla warfare in south of Lebanon.
Just looking forwards, Diana, to the future, we heard that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden had a conversation on the telephone last night. They don't seem to have been speaking very much the last few weeks, which is surprising, given that they are staunch allies. Do you think the Lebanese people still regard the United States as being an ally of Lebanon?
I believe that the international community in general, and including the United States, has, as I mentioned earlier, not stood up to its talk with regards to actually upholding international human rights and with regards to stopping Israeli aggression. And I believe that this level of impunity that Israel has reached today is allowing it to commit more and more atrocities that will only backfire in the region. That being said, what I would like to focus on more is what the Lebanese and what the Lebanese political class will do vis-a-vis this war that is unfolding. It's up to us as Lebanese to stand up to our interests, to pronounce what we want, to work today on electing a president of the republic, because Lebanon has been suffering from a presidential vacuum for the past 2 years now, to actually elect a capable government, because Lebanon's government today is in a caretaker mode, to actually deploy the Lebanese armed forces across all Lebanese territory, and to engage in a real process of political reform and of reconciliation among the Lebanese. There is a lot of work that the Lebanese political class has to do itself. And of course, the international community also has a moral and a political responsibility towards the Lebanese and towards the people of this region to stop this Israeli aggression, or to pressure the Israelis even more for them to stop their aggression.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Diana Menhem, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Tom.